All right, so once again for Music
Starliner
Majestic,
Media.
and with us tonight, Tommy Elskes. Tommy, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
Starliner Media presents
you too. Well,
Music Night at the Majestic with your host,
31
Michael
years ago,
Boswell.
for an amazing record, sent me a copy of King of Dixie. And I have listened to that album on and off ever since. So that's why you're here.
Well, great. That record kind of fell out of the sky and got lost for a lot of people. I ended up buying that record back from Amazing and redid it as Bohemia and added 3 songs of me just playing acoustic guitar. And then that little record company fell apart, and so it's now out of print too. But I'm hoping that in the next year or so, I'll be able to get things back together and start re-release it.
Oh, that'd be great. Now, in the digital world, though, folks can still purchase the digital tracks, correct?
I don't know if they can or not. I believe they can, but I don't even keep up with that. As little money as I make off of Spotify and all that stuff, I really don't give a damn. You know, somebody's listening to it, that's fine, but I'm not expecting any money off it. You know?
Yeah, exactly. Well, I'll tell you, Tommy, we often say here in this show that every musician's journey starts somewhere. Now, from what I've read, for you, that was in Albuquerque.
Right. My parents got me into the Methodist youth choir when I guess I was in the 5th or 6th grade because I was a juvenile delinquent, and they were trying to figure some way to get my attention and get me to do something right. And I really loved it, and I had a pretty good voice. And then in junior high school, I sang in the Albuquerque Boys Choir, which is really an excellent boys choir. And they take 2 kids every year to the Vienna Boys Choir. Generally takes a kid or 2 every year to sing with them. And I got to try out, and the guy was really nice. Their choir man was real nice, and he says he watched me for a minute, and he handed me a piece of new music, and he says, "Okay, read this." And I just looked at him, and he says, "You can't read music, can you?" And I said, "Nah." He says, "What does it look like?" I said, "It looks like little ants on a page." And he goes, "Well," he says, I think you may have dyslexia about that, or some kind of, learning disability." He says, "But in the real world," he says, "we can't take you for this choir because we require everybody to be able to read. But in the real world," he said, "how long does it take you to learn something when these guys are reading and you're just listening to them?" I said, "They can go through it 3 times and I know it." And he's like, "In the real world, if you were working in a recording studio," he said, "that would be a really valuable trick." He said, "because you don't have to read it. You just have to listen to it a couple of times and be done." And later on in life, when I moved to Austin and started doing commercials, I found out that was right. And my buddies Bill and Patterson, who used to do all the commercials, write them and produce them, and I'd walk in the studio and they'd go, "Here's Soul 2 take," and I'd sit down and they'd put the microphone in front of me, and while they were doing that, they'd be running the track by. They'd run it by a couple of times, and then they'd turn the mic on, and I would go through with it a couple times, and then we record it twice, and I'd leave there with a pocket full of money, and it was good. Now they just have canned music and people talk over it. It's not Jingle 30. And
exactly.
yeah, one of those years I did like 3 pizza commercials and a slew of root beer commercials, and I don't know what that was about, but
it's not to ask why.
No, it's pay and gig.
Exactly. Well, I'll
Well,
tell you. Go ahead.
go ahead.
No, go ahead. Go, you,
Well, after I got into high school, I hooked up with David Lloyd, who was my partner in Kiwi that Lyle was pushing all these years, and we started playing in a little place called Kelly's Other Side when I was 16, and it was nothing but a bar. It wasn't a restaurant, and the waitresses decided that we needed to learn about booze. So every night they would bring us a cocktail at a time, and the ABC guys would come in looking for underage people and drunks, and so as soon as that, everybody spotted them as soon as they walked in the door, and so the girls would just walk by and pick up our drinks and put a glass of water down. Yeah, it was quite the thing. So I broke into that's how I broke into show business. Now
well,
after that, David and I took off with two guys that we knew, Mike and George. And George was our chorus teacher all through high school, and he was the he did all kinds of choir stuff, and the guy was brilliant. He was brilliant piano player, the most sarcastic person in the whole world. And we ended up going to LA to make our fame and fortune and writing songs for the Flintstones. And thank God I never sold one. And we were playing in the only Shakey's Pizza Parlor in America where you didn't have to wear a straw hat and garters on your sleeves and shit and a little vest, because it was in Culver City, right across the street from Venice. And all the hippies in Venice were coming over there. And so they didn't want to hear that 4-string banjo stuff, and so me and Dave were a shoe-in, and we played out there. We stayed for almost a year before we gave it up and left. And I guess it was 2 or 3 years later, I'd gone off to Kansas and I was working steel and being a frame carpenter, and I was playing in a bluegrass band with a bunch of guys, but two of them had won the flat picking championships in Winfield already, so there wasn't much room for a guitar player. And they wanted me to come sing with them, and I thought, well, I'm not going to stand there and just twiddle my thumbs. And I thought, well, what can I play with a bluegrass band? Well, I thought either rubboard or spoons. Well, you can't steal a rubboard everywhere you go in case you lose your rubboard. But you can sure get a pair of spoons, even if you have to order a second bowl of soup in some restaurant. So I learned how to play spoons. I got fired from my job so that I could learn to play spoons. So I'd have the time to do it. And I got Asleep at the Wheel, Johnny Cash record, Stanley Clark. My God, I don't know who else, but I got Little Feat, the band, and tried to learn how to play spoons with all that stuff, so I'd be able to work through any genre,
mm-hmm.
And still, when I hooked up with David again, and this is in 1975, I've gone back to Albuquerque for just a brief trip, and I ran into David, and he was playing with John, who all three of us in high school had duos, and we played in all the little high school, things for talent night.
Right.
And so one of us would win, and then the next time the other one would win. And so anyway, three of us got together, and John and David had spent the year before, the winter, up in Vail playing at the Red Lion Inn, which is a fabulous place. And they were doing John Denver and Jim Croce music. And then when I got back to Albuquerque, I found out that they were going back there again. And David didn't want to play with me, and so I got John drunk and made him promise that I could come play spoons. I said, man, I can play spoons and you guys can play guitars, because they were much better guitar players than me. So, okay. And David was like freaking going, no, man, this is not happening. And so we ended up in Vail. And before that, we went out to Phoenix for a month, and we lived in one of those little old auto courts, right, where they have two little houses together, you know, and they're adobe, and we lived in there for a month with 3 mattresses side by side, and the people in that court, let me tell you, talk about a cast of characters. We lasted a month, and so, but by the time that we got to Vail, we weren't doing Jim Croce and John Denver music anymore. Let me fix this. We were doing, oh shit, well, there we go. We were doing Little Feat and, well, let me just hold it for a minute, I guess. We were doing Little Feat and Taj Mahal, and that really didn't fly with the Republicans up there too much. So we were forced to leave town. And the best part was, right before we left town, we met this family from Austin. And one of the girls, Georgia, said, you guys really need to be coming down to Austin. You could do well there. And we were like, well, we don't know anybody, nothing. And she goes, I live in a house. I talked to the girls about it, and I live in a house with 4 other nurses. And if you guys want to come down, we'll let you sleep on our floor for a month. We were like, okay, well, let's get fired now. You know, that's how that went. That's how we got to Austin in the first place. And once we got there, we figured we were about 5 years too late, because we could have been there having fun a long time before that. So we moved to Austin. We can't get a gig. Nobody will talk to us. We walk into the Texas Chili Parlor, not knowing what a nest of vipers we had walked into, because all these people knew everybody in the music business in Austin. And we went in and sat down one afternoon, and we were talking to people about us. You know, how can we get a gig? And nobody's helping us. They told us some places to go, but nobody was interested. So we finally walked in a couple of days later and sat down. There was nobody in there in the afternoon. We said, you guys are gonna listen to us. So we played for them, and they're going, well, yeah, okay, we can find you some work. And they did. And wasn't much work, because I ended up having to go to work at the chili parlor as the second guy to ever cook chili there. That turns out that they had opened up shop as the Texas Chili Parlor a month before we moved to Austin. And since I knew something about cooking red chili, as I had done it in New Mexico before, I found myself an easy way to make some bucks. So we did that, and we were playing in the chili parlor 3 or 4 nights a week for tips in the back of the place acoustically. And there. And it slowly got to where we were getting some gigs, and then we hooked up with Moon Hill Booking, and suddenly we were hooked up with B.W. Stevenson, Rusty Weir, Stephen Fromholtz. I think Willie was there for a while. I don't know, a bunch of people. Michael Martin Murphy. So we got hooked up with them, and ended up opening for, man, all kinds of people over the course of the next 3 or 4 years. I got a chance to sit and talk to Muddy Waters for 30 minutes with nobody else around.
Wow.
the same thing with Carl Perkins, and two of the and just amazing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, and you know, just sit down, shoot the shit. And I never thought that I would get the chance to do that, because those two guys were two of my favorites of all times, you know.
Yeah, tell me this, Tommy. What do you recall from the conversations with Muddy?
Just that I was so I was just thunderstruck that I got a chance to sit with him, you know. I just asked him what it was like in the old days, you know, and he told me. He said, "Man," he said it was exciting. He said it was frightening, because back during the 60s, he said, you never knew what you were going to get, you know, where you were going to get it, if you were going to be able to play someplace, or if they were going to cut you out, or, you know. And he says, and everybody carried a gun in their guitar case, you know, and hell, I did, you know what I mean? Like, for the first, I guess, until 1980, I carried a gun in my guitar case too, because we played some wild stuff around the South. You know, we did this little circuit. Every 3 weeks, we'd go down towards New Orleans, to Mobile, and we go to Memphis, Little Rock, Fayetteville, Arkansas, then down to Dallas, and points all over from, you know, in that circle. And we go out for 3 weeks and come back for a week. And I always carried a gun in my guitar case. You know, it was like, you never know what you're going to deal with next. And some of those guys back then were absolutely shady, you know. And oh, there was one time, and we went back to Albuquerque. And my ex-wife, who was running a bar there, called me up and said, listen, why don't you guys are, I hear you're coming through. Why don't you come and play at my bar? And I went, okay. So we went and we played one night, and next morning, about 10 o'clock in the morning, she calls me up and says, you guys need to come down here, because my boss has decided he wants a conjunto band in here tonight, and he's about to take your stuff off the stage. So we showed up there, and we're packing up, and David says, and I had my guitar case open, and David says, keep your guitar case open. So I flipped the case open, and my pistol's sitting there, and the guy walks up and he says, I said, so we need some money. And he says, no, I'm not going to pay you. And I said, David looks, and he says, why don't you look in that guitar case? Because he always gets paid. And the guy looks, and he looks at me, and I said, believe me, man, I always get paid, and there's more than one way to use a pistol. I said, so I'm going to follow you in there right now. And I just left the gun in the guitar case, followed him in there with my hand in my pocket. He's counting out money. I said, the only thing he said, I don't want to pay you. I said, the only thing that's going to assuage me, my whole thing, because you've embarrassed me in front of my friends and family by ditching us on this gig, and they were all going to show up tonight. So the only thing that's going to assuage my little conscience is a lot of money. And they paid us. But, you know, it was a weird life back then.
Yeah, I bet.
It's not much better now, but, you know, at least I'm not packing or even feel the need to anymore, you know.
Well, see, there's an improvement.
Yeah. And unless the country really goes off the rails, I won't do it
again. Now, you mentioned having a chance to talk with Carl Perkins.
I did. And we just talked about guitars, you know, about guitar playing, because I wanted to see what he was doing with his fingers. And man, he just, you know, he immediately was going, what do you want to know? You know, it was like, he was like, let me show you something. you know? So he showed me some bends and pull-offs and stuff that I, you know, I always wondered how he was doing that stuff, you know? And he was real forthcoming about everything. It was funny. Years later, I got carpal tunnel syndrome real bad in my left hand. And so I was having a real hard time playing bar chords. And I was living up in Telluride then. And I opened up a show for Richie Havens. And I was watching Richie Havens, and he was a little guy. He was real bird thin, and only about my size, 5'7", 5'8", or something. But he had Jimi Hendrix fingers. He had the longest fingers for a person his size I've ever seen, and he could get his thumb, the first joint of his thumb, halfway or 3/4 of the way across the guitar, you know. And he just played bar chords in an open tuning. But I thought that was real cool. And I thought, you know what? I bet if I hook my thumb over that, I won't have to play a bar chord if I drop my E string down to a D. So I started playing like that. Well, it turns out that later I got shot in that arm and lost the use of it for about a year. And took a long time to come back. When I came back, I definitely had to use the thumb thing. Well, so a couple of years later, I opened up a show for Richie Havens again, and I did my set, and I got off the stage, and he's standing backstage with his hands on his hips, and he walks up with this real stern face and says, "You ripped me off, man." And I started laughing. I said, "Well, first of all, man, it was medically expedient." And I said, and the second of all, do you think I rip off anybody but the best? And he just laughed and gave me a big hug. And he says, "Man, that's the first time I've seen anybody do that." You know, he says, "That's cool." But, so my guitar playing is, I've had to rearrange it any number of times over the years, you know, and I still play in mostly a drop D tuning, so I don't have to play a bar chord.
Yeah.
But that's, you know, that was just a condition after being shot. Some things work, some things don't, because I don't have a carpal tunnel anymore. When I got shot, they took all the bone out of my forearm and put steel in it, and then 4 months later, they took all the steel out and replaced it with my hip bone. So my arm doesn't exactly work and won't rotate exactly right. So, you know, you learn how to deal with it.
Adapt.
Yep. And overcome.
There you go. Now, tell me this, Tommy. When you first started playing, who were the guitar players that were your biggest influences?
I'll tell you who the biggest one was Dave Bromberg. In 71, right after I got out of high school, that summer, I got hijacked. I was kind of going down the rabbit hole with dope. And 3 of my friends showed up at my house one afternoon and said, "You need to get in the van with us, man. Pack a bag." And I said, "Pack a bag?" He said, "Yeah, pack a bag, man. Pack a bag for a week or so." What are we doing? He said, "We're taking Ricky to the airport." I said, "Why do I need to pack a bag?" He said, "Shut up. Pack a bag." I said, "I don't have any money." Doug says, "I got a bunch of money. Shut up and pack a bag." So I packed the bag, got in the truck, and we took him to the airport in New York City. And then we kept on drifting on up. We ended up in Antigonish, Nova Scotia before we turned around. And it was one serious trip. Where was I going with that? Oh, So we stopped on the way back. We stopped at, I think it was the second Mariposa Folk Festival in Canada. And my God, Joni Mitchell, a whole bunch of people. I mean, like some of the best bluegrass and acoustic music I've ever heard. And during that, I got to sit not 6 feet from Dave Bromberg.
Oh, wow.
And watch him play, is it Devil in Disguise, Demon in Disguise or something?
Mm-hmm.
Amazing shit. You know what I mean? Like I was like, I'm sure I was just like, what? You know, mouth open and eyes bugged out. And, but he was the one that really, after that, I wanted to really learn to finger pick. And I'd started finger picking, when I was 13, I went to the YMCA in Albuquerque, and there was this wonderful guy there, Larry McGinnis, who taught guitar at the YMCA in Albuquerque for like 50 years.
Oh, wow.
And just passed away a few years ago. He was like 90 or something. And but the guy was a great finger style guitar player, man, and he could play all kinds of stuff, flamenco, classical. And he said, you guys, I'm going to give you 6 weeks. I'm going to show you this stuff. If you master this stuff, you can play anything that I play. And I was like, oh, that's cool. And it was just really basic stuff. But, and I still haven't mastered it, but it sure has made me the guitar player that I am, just that 6 weeks of learning the basics about the stuff. So anyway, but David Bromberg, man, he floored me. I could not believe the stuff he was playing. And even though I wasn't a flat picker, but Doc Watson was there. And I don't know, man. It's like I just love that stuff. I can't play that fast on my best day with help, So anyway, so we did that trip and got back to Albuquerque and went on with our sorry lives. So ask me something else.
Well, Dave, as we're talking about guitars, what's your go-to guitar?
Actually, at this point, I have only one guitar. It's a Taylor 810 that 25 years ago, a friend of mine, Russell Gravitt, who has been a restaurateur around Austin and then moved to D.C., and he was managing a sushi bar for his friend Daisuke Utagawa. The best sushi bar in DC, apparently, because they took bento boxes to the Japanese embassy 365 for lunch. And so Russell had brought Daisuke to town, and we were sitting up on the top of the Hyatt or something one night, and I was playing my guitar, which was falling apart. And I'd had it for a long time, and it was a really great guitar, but it was just literally coming apart at the seams. So I guess about 2 months later, I ended up going to DC. And when I got there, hooked up with Russell and Daisuke, and we went out to dinner at the sushi bar, best meal I think I've ever had. And then we're up in a hotel someplace, and I said, Daisuke says, are you going to play something for us? And I said, well, sure. He says, well, I'll be right back. Just a second. So he goes back down to his car and comes up and puts the guitar in the bed and says, here, man, this is yours. I said, what? He says, here, this is yours. I opened it up, man, and it's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And I'm like, what are you talking about? He goes, well, he said, when I was a teenager in Japan, he says, I was a thrash bass player. And he said, I thought I was really something. And he said, you thrilled me so much listening to you play the last time that I went back to DC and I spent 3 days in the biggest guitar store in DC until I found the best guitar in the store and I bought it. And he says, after 6 weeks, I decided that I was never going to be shit on that guitar. And since you were the guy that thrilled me, he said, you get the guitar. Wow. I was like, man, I can't accept this. And he's going, please take it. Okay. He says, it'll drive me crazy if it's sitting around there. So I got a $4,000 guitar as a present. And it's the best guitar. It's truly one of the best sounding guitars I've ever heard. And I have never played anything since. I got rid of all my other guitars, and that's all I got. So it's I'm gonna keep it. It'll be like Willie's Trigger, you know.
There you go.
But I don't need another guitar. Mine fills the bill for me quite well.
Yeah, I'd say. Well, I'll tell you, Tommy, we covered guitar influences. Vocally, you have a very distinctive, unique voice. Who
people say that?
What's that?
People say that.
Including Lyle.
Yes. And I'm proud to say that he does.
Yeah. Well, there's the quote. We've got it up there. You know, when Tommy starts singing, I stop talking. I just love his voice. From Lyle Lovett. That's a pretty good endorsement there.
Well, I'll never forget when I was living in Telluride for 6 years, and I had the greatest gig in the world. I was playing in the most beautiful great room and bar, watching the sunset every day. When the sun went down, at the time the sun went down, I could take a break, walk into the bar, get a shot and a beer, smoke a cigarette, and then go back to work. It was awesome. Lyle shows up one afternoon, and my wife at the time sits down and starts talking to him. I started playing, and he says, Ruth Ann, I'm sorry, but please, I need to listen to Tommy. Shut her down, man. And I was like, when she wasn't offended, and when she got back to the house, she was like, wow, Lyle really likes to listen to you sing, doesn't he? And I was thinking to myself, well, maybe he just doesn't want to hear you talk. But maybe
either way, you'll take it, right?
Maybe that's why she shot me. Anyway, but yeah, Lyle has been such a wonderful guy. You know, we met him. He was running the coffee house at A&M, and he called our booking agent, Moon Hill, and said, listen, I know you guys have, you know, all these names. Do you have something that I can afford? They said, well, yeah, we think we got something you can afford. He could afford us, but we had to sleep on his floor in his apartment. And that wasn't the last time I woke up drinking too much and drooling into the linoleum in Lyle's apartment and face down. But so we went out and played the coffee house, and Lyle opened up for us. And man, we really, really liked what he was doing. And so he got us some more gigs at a place called Grins, which was a little, go away. Damn it. Are you there? Let's see. I did something wrong here, man. I'm sorry. Can you still see me?
Yeah, I see you.
Okay. Well, shit.
Yeah, now we lost you.
Okay. Now am I back? No.
Nope. You're back in black. There you go. Now you're there.
All right.
I get a black screen for a moment.
I need to figure out how to get rid of. No. Anyway, all I can see now is. Let me try this again. I cannot make my. Anyway, never mind. I can't see. I've got letters up here now, and I'm technologically challenged, so
Well,
it's
we
okay.
can see you
I
and
can
hear
see
you.
the top of your head. And I got a face made for radio anyway, so I don't care if I see mine. Anyway, so we started talking to Lyle. You need to come down to Austin, and there was another band, Uncle Walt's band, where we were doing kind of rock and roll and blues and stuff. They were doing jazz, and they were awesome. I mean, killer. And we all had three vocals, which was kind of unique. And so they kept pestering him. We kept pestering him. Finally, one night I'm going, "Oh, you really need to come to Austin." And he goes, "Well, why?" And I said, "Well, you got a bunch of these hairy-legged core turds up here, and in Austin, there's a whole lot of beautiful women." And he went, "Oh, I'll be right there." So we started getting him to Austin to open up shows for us. And lo and behold, man, he blew on by us. But I'll tell you what, Lyle's the kind of guy, he never forgets his friends. And he's one of the kindest, most generous people I've ever met, you know. And I used to go occasionally and spend a night at his folks' house down in Spring or Klein. And they were just too cool for school, you know. Thing is that, Lyle was set up to not fail. His parents backed him with everything he wanted to do. His parents backed him on it. And there's not many people, I don't think there's very many people in the music business that I know of whose parents have backed them like that. Most of the time it's like, what are you thinking? Get a real job, and but Lyle's folks were never like that. They were like, do it, and one thing Lyle had, and I've been my own worst enemy my whole career, and I shoot myself in the foot every chance I get, And Lyle has business acumen. He's a real stable person. He was never all hopped up and nowhere to go, And I appreciate the fact that because of that, he's done so well, But like I said, he never forgot us, Hell, he pestered us for years to go and do it again, put the Kiwi brothers back together. And David told him, I haven't even played out in a long time. And Johnny says, and I'll never be able to hit those high notes, even with Michael Jackson clothespins on. And I told him, if I ever got that hopped up again to play spoons that fast, I'd have a heart attack. It would take some serious pharmaceutical cocaine and I would die. So it ain't happening. Well, he kept on and kept on and kept on, and we finally caved in. And David came down from Tennessee, and we spent 3 days at John's house putting together 9 songs. And I think we were all pretty amazed as good as it came out, We were a little I could say for sure we were a little out of our comfort zone on that one, It's like I ain't the man I used to be, but I'm somebody else, and I kind of like him better. And it's not as hard on me either,
That's a plus.
Yes, it is. Yeah. Yeah. 'Cause they're right. I mean, like, you can't weaken.
Well, to tell you, moving forward,
Yes.
is actually, you know what? We never even got into vocal influences. Who was the first vocalist that you really were amazed by?
Joni Mitchell. I mean, well, Billie Holiday. You know, when I was a kid, my parents my parents had kind of eclectic taste. They were really into big band music because they were living in the 40s and 50s, and but they really liked blues and jazz, and so I got to hear that. But I think that let's see, girl singers, Judy Collins, Joni Mitchell, uh, Linda Ronstadt, Bonnie Raitt, you know, those girls thrilled me. Uh, Early on, I'm trying to think of, oh, hell, I loved Eddie Arnold. You know, and even though I wasn't a country guy at all, Eddie Arnold, I was in love with Dolly. Uh, on Saturday in Albuquerque, they had, what was it? It was Porter Wagner with Dolly Parton show. And then there was the Val de la O show. And Val de la O was the biggest Spanish musical show on TV. And man, they had the best people in Mexico. I mean, and even if you weren't into it, the show and the costumes and the talent was killer. So I liked watching all that, you know. And but I think one of my absolute favorite singers is Lowell George, and Levon Helm from the band. I always liked Leo Kottke because he sounds like a man singing. He doesn't sound like a singer. He sounds like a man that can sing. And
I'd read the Cab Calloway when you were really young.
oh yeah. As a matter of fact, we used to do Minnie the Moocher, which I'd forgotten about. But yeah, Cab Calloway. As a matter of fact, after my dad passed away years ago, it was Halloween, and I'd flown out to Albuquerque, and I came back, and I was the perfect size for his double-breasted suit with real square shoulders. And so I went on Halloween. We were playing, and I came in that suit, and we did Cab Calloway. So it was awesome, man. Let me,
I'll tell you, you mentioned Eddie Arnold.
yeah,
I
Eddie
had
Arnold, man.
I had interviewed him for my old radio show,
Uh-huh.
and towards the end of it, I asked him, like, Eddie, you've been in the business for like 6 decades. There's never been any scandal. There's never been anything. What do you attribute that to? And he pauses. He says, "Well, I'm just boring, I guess." He says, "Just give me a good cheeseburger, and I'm a happy guy." So I told him, I go, you know what? I'm right there with you. So he says, all right, well, tell you what, the next time you're, in town, give me a call and we'll go get a cheeseburger. So I said, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. So next time I was in town, I call him up. He's like, oh, okay, come on out. So, I go to his office and I get there and he says, bit of change of plans. Do you like Thai food? And I said, Eddie, I've honestly never had Thai food, and I wouldn't have expected that first time to be in Tennessee, to be honest with you.
Yeah,
And
right.
he's like, oh, well, some friends and I, have a taste for Thai food, so we're all going to go. And my first thought was, man, knowing all the people that this guy is friends with, who could I have stumbled into lunch, right?
Right.
So we get in. Now, this would have been like 93. All right.
Right.
We get into his 85 Buick LeSabre, or Park Avenue, I mean. So, it's got like 110,000 miles on it. I'm just laughing because, I mean, you want to talk about down to earth. Here's a guy that could have
Right.
anything he wanted. He's driving an 8-year-old Buick with 110,000 miles on it. So we get to the Thai food restaurant. We walk in, and all the staff, "Oh, hello, Mr. Arnold. Mr. Arnold, how are you?" Blah, blah. And he says hi to everybody, calls them by name. We sit down. Now, I'm waiting to see who's showing up for friends, right?
Right.
So a guy walks in, very unassuming, and Eddie says, "Oh, Bobby's here." And I said, "Okay, Bobby." I'm trying to think, do I recognize the guy? Do I ever? He says, "Bobby has a glass cutting business here in town. He's amazing." And Eddie started to tell me about all just the amazing craftsmanship that this guy has on his glass cutting. So, yeah, we eat. Yeah, a couple other folks, showed up as well. So afterwards, Eddie wanted me to see this mirror that Bobby was cutting for George Jones' house.
Oh,
So we
really?
go over to the glass place, and Eddie's there looking at this mirror, and the perimeter of it had a 45-degree bevel cut.
Right.
And, Eddie's just looking, just mystified, going, "Michael, look at that cut. Isn't that amazing?" And he was just, so thrilled by this. I thought this is just fantastic, you know? So, but yeah, that was him. And then from that point on, anytime that I was, in Nashville or if he was in Chicago, we'd call each other and you know, meet
Get a
up, go to his show,
cheeseburger.
get something to eat, what have you. So, but just truly an amazingly down to earth guy with so many unbelievable stories.
Oh, that's cool, man. Yeah. You know who I was thinking about too that I as a kid, uh, I thought Tennessee Ernie Ford hung the moon. You
Mhm.
know? And that was a manly voice, and I still do. I still do 16 tons,
Okay. Well, I'll tell
which
you that the stuff that he did with Cliffy Stone, there's something about that stuff the country music recorded in California that had a distinct sound,
right,
to it. And Shotgun Boogie, Blackberry Boogie, all those songs.
right.
I mean, just so cool.
Well, I wonder if they did that in L.A. or uh, or if they did that in Bakersfield.
I thought it was at Capitol
Oh,
in
it probably
L.A.
was.
I'm pretty sure. I'd have to double check, but I vaguely, remember that being the case. So,
Right.
but the sound was just so clean.
Cool. Yeah. I like those guys. All of
Yep.
them.
Well, I'll tell you, I mentioned at the beginning, it was the King of Dixie album
Hmm.
that, was my first exposure to your music. How did that album come about? And then we'll get into some of the songs on there.
Well, to tell you the truth, people had been pestering me for 20 years to put out a record. And I don't know why it never happened, but all my peers, all the guys that I played with in 20 different bands and stuff, kept going, "Man, we want to play on your record. Pull it together." And finally, the guys at Amazing uh, decided that they would foot the bill. Well, we got Steven Doster, my buddy, to produce it, and it was his first real production, uh, and he did fabulous. But we had no budget, so we had budget for the musicians, but we didn't have budget for beer or cokes or a sandwich or nothing. So it was pretty funny at one point, and most of us were semi broke at the time. It was back about, I guess it was right after the bust in the 80s, and we were working on that record in 92, 93. And So none of the musicians that I wanted to play with me, most of them weren't doing real well right then. And we were in the studio one night, and all of a sudden Keith Carper, our bass player, walks in, and you know, Keith was always skinny, and all of a sudden he had this little paunch on him, just a little one. And he walks in and he's all thrilled, and he says, "Anybody got 50 cents? Why is that?" And he says, "Well, they got a Zagnut bar in that candy machine, and I haven't seen a Zagnut bar in years. So nobody's got 50 cents. There's like 8 guys in the studio. Nobody's got 50 cents. I said, all right. So I walked back out to our car, which is the most horrific. There was more nasty stuff on the floor of that car. And I started digging into the floor mats. And I came up with 50 cents, and I had to, it was so sticky and nasty, I had to go and wash it and my hands twice before it would feed into the candy machine, right? So I bring in a candy, and the whole room just happened to be quiet at the time, and I threw it down on his little belly and said, "There you go, fatty. There's your damn candy bar." And he looks just stricken, and he says, "Well, I suppose the next time I walk in here, I'll check my pride at the door." That's kind of how that went. We were pretty much destitute, but we were having a good time. And I sure was proud of those guys. I mean, like, they really were friends of mine who really wanted to play on it, had mentioned it for years, and it all came together really like gangbusters. I loved it. Yeah. That was some of the most fun recording I've ever done. So yeah. Yeah, that was good.
Yeah. Now I'll tell you, going through some of the tracks on that album, title track, King of Dixie. What's the story behind that song?
Well, my parents were from Sugar Land, okay? Sugar Land, Texas, right outside of Houston. And we used to go down to Sugar Land almost every summer for a couple of weeks and hang out with my grandparents and my aunts and uncles. And man, I always loved it. And I always loved the way women talked. And my Aunt Irene was the best. As soon as you see my Aunt Irene, she'd run up, gather you up and go, "Oh, baby, give me some sugar." And give you a big kiss and squeeze you to death, you know? It was like, you knew Aunt Irene loved you, you know? It was like, and so I was always pretty enamored of girls with a Southern accent, you know? And so I got down to Texas and pretty much was living the life of Riley while Riley was away. There were so many pretty girls, and I wanted to kiss them all. And finally, we'd been traveling. I guess we'd been traveling all around our little southern route for a year or something before that one came to fruition. And I was able to finish it. But, and now it's so funny. It's, King of Dixie, you know, Dixie's anathema now, you know what I mean? Like, and when I wrote that song, which I have always considered Dixie, where they used a French $10 bill, you know, a D. And that's what I considered Dixie. If you were in the place, if you were within whatever, how many miles it is of New Orleans, where they were using French money and it was a Dixie, what they called a Dixie for a $10 bill, that's what I considered Dixie. Well, you know, to me, it had no racist or shitty connotations at all, you know? And, and now it's like, I sing the song, you know, but every time I sing it now, it's like, am I gonna piss somebody off? I don't care. Sorry, I wrote that 40 years ago, you know, and it's not. It was innocent then. It's innocent now, you know. But then again, when we first put the band together about 3.5, 4 years ago, we named it the Dixie Kings, and then all the shit went down. And we looked at each other one day and went, well, I guess we can't call it the Dixie Kings anymore. But I'll be damned if I'm going to change King of Dixie. So anyway, it's a good thing I have music to fall back on.
Well, tell you, getting back to the album, tell us the story behind Bro Bridge.
Oh, man. All right. We broke the band up, or I broke the band up in 1981. And shortly thereafter, I took off and went to Shreveport. My friend Andy and Scotty Teakle owned a place called Monsour's Oyster Bar, and they bought it from Mr. Monsour a couple of years before, and we'd played in Shreveport a bunch. It's how we got to know them, and this bar was a little shotgun bar, about 20 feet wide and 100 feet long, and it was right downtown, almost under the bridge where the highway goes over. And it was the kind of place where when the boys came and opened it up at 9 o'clock in the morning, there was 15 guys standing out front. And in that bar, on one side, there was 4 tops, and on the other side, there was nothing but a bar with, in Louisiana, you could sell booze where you sold booze, right? You could sell bottles to go. So the whole back behind the bar side was full of bottles. They had a row of 15 stools, the kind that used to be in the old drugstores that you couldn't pick up and hit somebody with. You know, they were nailed to the floor. So these guys would all be standing out front, and it was all the regular rummies. And there was the doctors and the lawyers and the Indian chiefs and the guys that lived under the bridge. And at 9 o'clock in the morning, the guy under the bridge is looking at the biggest banker in town going, "Hey, Fred, how's it going?" He's going, "Hi, Roger, what's up?" So they walk into town, they walk into the bar. Everybody sits down. Andy looks at him. He starts going up and down the row, and he starts putting glasses in front of everybody because he knows what they want. Then he comes back with bottles, and he fills the glasses up. And then he has more bottles, and he goes and fills the glasses, the other ones up. And then the guys that are beeraholics have to wait till the end because he's got these giant, the frozen schooners. And all he had was PBR. I have a theory about PBR, and that's why beeraholics end up on PBR. It's because it's got more formaldehyde, and you get a better buzz. But I like PBR, so who am I to say? Anyway, so these guys would come in, he'd fill them up. He'd go to the back and start stuff in the kitchen and come back about 10 minutes later. There's nobody there and there's money all over the bar. That's the kind of bar I like, So one night we're eating oysters and this guy shows up out front in his Oldsmobile, blue Oldsmobile with a rag top. And if you were to put the top up, it would be like flags. It was a rag top. And he had the back seat, had a Coleman cooler in it, full up with glass bottles, and walks in and says, "Andy, come on, man, you got to go with me." He says, "I'm going to Bro Bridge now tonight, and I need somebody to go with me down there." And he says, "Well, I can't go, man." He says, "My brother's out of town." He says, "I got to run the bar." He says, "Well, Andy, I got to have somebody to go with me because I'm having a crawfish boil down there." And he says, "Oh, crawfish boil?" He says, "Yeah, man. All my cousins and everybody going to be there. It's going to be a big fado, man." He says, "You got to go with me on there." And he says, "Well, I can't go, man." He says, And you could see the light bulb go on over his head. And he says, but my friend here could stand a cultural experience. Now, it wasn't that I didn't know how Cajun people are, because two of my uncles were ones. And my uncle Jimmy Couvillon, as a matter of fact, in our family, they still say, don't be a Couvillon now. He was a trickster. He and my uncle Arthur Brame were both tricksters, and they took my mom out to the end of a pier one time because she loved blue crab, but she was deathly afraid of them in the water. So they tossed her off the dock where all the blue crab traps were. Well, she never forgave them. And every time that they would try and get me to eat crawfish, she would say, honey, don't you do that. She goes, that's just Cajun bait. So my Uncle Jimmy, needless to say, took me out in the backyard, and we'd knock off the little chimneys because he lived by the bayou. Knock off the little chimneys and give me a string and bacon. And so I'm pulling crawdads out. And I thought that was the coolest thing in the world, right? I'm about 4. Well, that night I decided I was going to go crawfish hunting again. So I went in the kitchen and got string and a bacon, and I'm about to walk out the back door. Jimmy sees me and he says, no, you can't go out there, man. We got to turn the light on and you got to put your shoes. I said, why? And he says, well, you know those little chimneys where the crawdads was? He says, well, in the daytime, crawdad's sleeping down there. And when you put that bacon down there, you wake him up. But at night, that's when the crawdad wake up. And you know what they do? They go out in the yard and they walk all over the yard and they just wait for little babies to come out so they can eat their toes. You know, it was about a year before I figured out that my Uncle Jimmy was full as a Christmas goose, so to speak. So I'm used to this. Well, I get in the car with this guy and we start heading to Bro Bridge. And the car is completely rotted out. It's got plywood on the floor. So about the time we hit 100 miles an hour, and this is when you could still drink and drive in Louisiana. And I don't care what the mad mothers say. It was a beautiful time in my world, you know? And so we hit about 100 miles an hour, and the guy kicks the plywood out of the way, throws that beer bottle down as hard as he can, and that bottle goes, I said, what are you doing, man? He says, I'm just getting everything out the evidence hole. I said, what? He says, I'm getting everything out the evidence hole. I said, what? I said, what? He says, the evidence hole, you Yankee. He says, I said, what's the evidence hole? He says, well, when the cops pull you over, and they will, he says, what you do is you get on the side of the road and you hit your brakes real hard so the cop has to come up on you. And then when he's walking up, you put everything down the evidence hole. I said, and then he gives you the ticket, because he will. And he says, then when he goes back to his car, he says, I got a kill switch under the dash. And I just turn that switch, and then my car goes woo, 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 woo. Cop gets almost back to his car and come back. What's wrong with your car? He says, must be vapor lock or something, officer. I don't know. But, you know, you just get in your car and go on now, and I'll be okay in a few minutes. It'll come over. So when the cop goes back to his car the second time, that's when you pull everything out the evidence hole. So when he backs up, he can't see it under the car. And I'm like, this is great. This is the guy I'm in the car with, right? At 100 miles an hour. So the next morning, I wake up in Bro Bridge with these 3 great big guys pulling me out the car. I had gotten in an automobile accident a little earlier, and my teeth were pretty jaggedy, and these guys made me look like I had perfect dental work. And the first one hands me a beer, a Dixie beer, and says, drink this. I said, okay. And it was good. The next one pulls a crawfish apart and sticks the head in my mouth. These guys are giants. I'm not going to not do what they said. sticks the head in my mouth and said, "Fuck this." And I did. And that was good too. And that's about all I remember for the next 3 days. It was like every once in a while, still 45 years later, I will get something kind of like an acid flashback and go, I remember that. Oh yeah, man, that was cool. But it was kind of foggy out for those 3 days. And unfortunately, I had no other wardrobe with me besides what I was wearing. And so at the end of 3 days, he took me back to Shreveport and I burned my clothes and went on with my sorry life. So that's the story. Anyway, and that's mostly the truth, what I remember of it.
As best I recall.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
But
well, the tracks from that album you have included on Bohemia.
Right. That's what we did was we took when I bought that record back, we took Bohemia. I think that we might have remixed a little bit of something on it, but then we added 3 songs at the end that I did acoustic. Madman Across the Water and
Motherless Children.
Oh yeah, Motherless Children and something else. Anyway, so that's how that went, and then we re-released it for a while, and then there was a crunch and everybody ran out of money, and so at some point that will get re-released again. But I ain't holding my breath.
Well, on the Live at Green Hall album,
you
mentioned about doing covered Taj Mahal songs back in Telluride. You got a cover of She Caught the Katy on the Live at Green Hall. How do you choose, since the covers that you have released on your albums are diverse? Poison Ivy, She Caught the Katy, Madman, Walk Away Renee. How do you choose what songs to cover for your releases?
Well, it's all lyric driven, pretty much. If I like the lyrics, whether they're serious or just silly, it's most of it's lyric driven. Not that the music doesn't, isn't equally there, but the lyrics are what gets me first. And then I have to figure out, because my guitar style is so, I don't want to say limited, but like I said, there's stuff I can't do physically to play guitar like most guys, So then I have to figure out if I can get away with it guitar wise, right? So there's that. First of all, it's lyric driven. Second of all, I like the music, if I like the lyrics like that. But then I have to figure out if I can figure a way to make my guitar happen. And I toss a bunch of stuff that I'd really like to do, because I can't get away with it on a guitar, And so it's like I'm kind of confined by that, or maybe not, But yeah, I always like to do a dark song and take a dark song and make it darker. So there's, it's like it's like Madman. Somebody came and said, "Man, that's dark." Oh, I'm doing my job then, It's like, and I haven't got it recorded, but I was going to I just, in the last few months, I put I put a song in my repertoire. All right, I was going home one afternoon from my day job, and I pulled into the Texaco station. It was one of those gas stations where they play that really crappy music out of the gas pumps, right? It's not rock and roll. It's not R&B. It's not country. It ain't Western. It's just shit. So I'm waiting and expecting the worst, and I'm really not into that. I hate those gas pumps. You know, it's one of those things that lights me up. Lo and behold, there was a song came out of the gas pump that I recognized quite well from my totally misspent youth. And it was one that, even though it was written by a guy from California, I really liked it. So on the way home, and see, I'm profoundly deaf in this ear and almost that way in this ear. You know, my audiologist, who was a real smart mouthed little girl, the last time, 22, 23, she says, well, you're profoundly deaf in this ear, and in this ear you have CHS. And I said, what's CHS? She said, you can't hear shit. And I said, well, honey, if you look on your little graph that you have in your lap, I said, you'll find out that I've lost my hearing mostly in the range of women's voices, so I win. Anyway, because of that, I don't have a radio in my car. I couldn't hear it if I did, you know. So I'm humming it on the way home, and I'm thinking, you know, you might be able to pull the guitar off on this. And I got home and thought about it and didn't have time to do anything. But I get PTSD every night at 3 o'clock in the morning. So I got up, had a shot and a beer and smoked reefer and smoked a cigarette and went out on the front porch with my guitar while I was doing that and started working on the song. And I thought, damn, this is okay. So the next afternoon, when my wife shows up, I said, honey, listen to this, see what you think. And she goes, well, I really like that, but you know, you need to get on the internet and find out what the real words are. And I'm like, what? And she goes, well, you're the guy that thought Inagata de Vita was enchilada de Vita or in a box is a pizza or some ridiculous thing. And I'm going, well, Inagata de Vita was pretty ridiculous too. And she goes, yeah, but it wasn't in a box as a pizza. So anyway, so I got on the internet and lo and behold, I did have one word wrong. And the word was what I'd been thinking of it was began, right? And the lyric is, I stopped into a church, I passed along the way. I got down on my knees and began to pray. Well, that wasn't the word, it was pretend, which makes the song twice as dark. And I loved it, you know? So I said, well, thanks, honey. And so anyway, so I put that one in.
Mm-hmm.
Just for the dark part. I wish I could play it for you now, but that'll have to wait. But you'd like that. It does make the song after I found that word, and it makes me sing it darker.
Tell me this, what's a song that people might think is the most left field choice for one of your live shows? Something they would not expect you to do.
Oh man. Well, people are always surprised when I do Salisbury Hill, Peter Gabriel song.
Mm-hmm.
That always makes people look around and go, what the hell is that? You know? That and I guess Madman Across the Water always seems to surprise people. And Little Feat's song Rock and Roll Doctor.
Mm-hmm.
So, and people kind of, but I don't think any of those songs are way left field or anything, but they're just kind of. I guess I didn't call everybody and tell them not to call me, huh? Oh, well.
Well, What you gonna do?
Yeah, I know. No matter where you go, there you are. And don't you feel more like you do now than when you came?
One of the things I wanted to touch on is your artwork.
Ah, funny. You should mention that. You want to see?
Yeah.
There's one of my fish.
Oh, very cool.
And here's another one. And this one, the turtle. I originally got the idea for these from there was a group of Native Americans in southwestern New Mexico that lived there until about the 1150s or something like that, the Mimbres Indians. And this turtle was one of on their burial pots. And that always, that's where I got the idea of the fish, was one of their fish. But then I changed it all up. The fish is completely different. Animals there. And so I did that. Well, I started doing artwork after I got shot and couldn't do anything. I got my arm blown off, essentially. And so I was looking for something non-criminal to do because I was pretty much not ambulatory. I couldn't get around much and do much. So I decided I would teach myself to draw because up until then, I couldn't draw a stick man that you'd recognize. And I was determined I would teach myself to draw fish. So I did. And then after my arm came back, I put that away for a number of years. And now that things are so iffy in the music market these days, I'm doing a big push for that, and I do greeting cards and all kinds of stuff.
Now, can folks purchase those through the website, or
they will be able to in a little while. I'm getting that together right now, so I imagine in the next month or so they'll be able to find me and do that. Anyway, I hope so.
All right. Well, tell you what, Tommy, anything else you want to make sure we touch on here before we wrap this thing up?
Oh, I think I've bullshitted you all I can.
Say it ain't so.
And yeah, man, this has been a real pleasure. Thank you, Michael.
Hey, no problem.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, Tommy, we've had your website and Facebook stuff scrolling across the screen throughout the show so folks can find you. And I did on the website, they can listen to your music. They can, I believe, purchase it on there. So
yes,
they can
and
get all that.
There's a bunch of stuff there's all kinds of stuff of me on YouTube. Just got to dig for it. And on YouTube, we've got a couple of cuts of my band, the Bayou Kings.
Mm-hmm.
So check that out too. It's a whole different thing.
And of course, the Bayou Kings website, thebayoukings.com. Folks can check that out as well.
That's it.
So
all right.
Well,
thank you so much, man.
Hey, no problem. And to say we'll bring this one to a close. Tommy, thanks for taking the time to join us.
My pleasure, man. I'll talk to you again, I hope.
Sounds good to me.
Adios.
All right. Have a good one. Bye.
You too.
This has been Music Night at the Majestic with Michael Boswell. If you enjoyed this edition of Music Night at the Majestic, follow us on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, and at musicnight.net. Music Night at the Majestic is a copyright production of Starliner Media. Any use of the accounts and descriptions of this program, its audio or visual content, without the express written consent of Starliner Media is prohibited. Thank you for joining us this evening. We'll see you next time for Music Night at the Majestic. This is your announcer speaking. Starliner Media.